I mean, obviously it was just a really rough game for us. It was unfortunate because I thought we, first 4 or 5 minutes, we started the game off just playing really clean. And it didn't last long. I mean, it happened pretty quick where we couldn't score, we couldn't get in the paint. I mean, we try to make a point always of getting the ball to the paint, collapsing defenses, and then, create the chase is what I call it. Their defense, they got physical, and we couldn't get to the paint. And we just kind of settled. We turned it over. And then we had a lot of what I call shooting turnovers, which are just horrible shots that might as well be a turnover. And everything just kind of all went bad at the same time. And it was just a rough one. It was a rough one for everybody.
Hey, this is Chris Murray, and you're listening to The Briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Blazer fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, episode 87 of The Briefcase. I am your host, Casey Holdahl, and that was Chauncey Phillips discussing Portland's 142-82 loss to the Miami Heat Friday night in Miami, 60-point loss, the second 60-point loss of the season for the Trailblazers, the largest win in franchise history for the Miami Heat, the third game of a 7-game road trip wherein the first 2 games the Blazers also lost by double digits, granted, not by 60 points, but games that were basically only competitive for about a half, which at this point in time seems like what we're getting from the Trailblazers as they finish out the 2023-24 schedule. Portland has 4 more road games remaining on this trip, then head home to play 3 games at home before finishing up the season a few weeks from now in Sacramento versus the Kings. There's still much to be determined this season, though much of that will be defined by losses rather than wins for the Portland Trailblazers and for all the teams that are around the Trailblazers in the bottom of the NBA standings. I know they'd like to get some wins before this season's over. I know they'd like to get some players back before the season is over, as they did on Friday night. We'll talk about the road trip, we'll look at the lottery odds, and we'll hear from Justin Minaya on this edition of The Briefcase. Well, as I mentioned, 3 games into a 7-game trip, the Trailblazers start the trip on Monday by losing to the Rockets 110-92 at the Toyota Center. After a close first half, the Rockets outscored the Blazers by 22 in the second half to pull away to win that game. Rockets, one of the hottest teams in the NBA. The Blazers gave them a pretty good run in the first half, weren't able to keep pace in the second half, particularly in the third quarter, where I think the Rockets might have gotten on like a 20-2 run to basically put that game away. Delano Banton, 28 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists for his first double-double in that game. Scoot Henderson, 15 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds in that game as well. 2 nights later, the Blazers head to Atlanta to face the Hawks, end up losing 120-106. After a close first quarter, the Blazers go into the half trailing by just 6, but go down by as many as 16 in the third quarter as the Hawks once again kind of show their mettle. They're missing players as well, not nearly as many players as the Trailblazers are missing. Portland ends up losing that game by 14. Delano Banton once again has a great night, at least offensively. Career high 31 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists for Delano. Toumani Camara, 17 points on 7 of 9 shooting, 4 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal in a very good game for Toumani, though he suffered an injury in that game, which we'll talk about here in a moment. Kept him out at least for the Miami game and might keep him out for longer than that. Scoot Henderson, 15 points, 6 assists, 2 steals in that game as well. Day off once again. Blazers head to Miami, lose to the Heat, as I mentioned, 142-82 Friday night. Miami scored 15 straight to start the second quarter, outscored Portland 45-21 in the second quarter to take control of that game and then pull away in the second half. As I mentioned, the largest margin of victory for the Heat in franchise history. However, not the worst loss for the Trailblazers in franchise history, not even the worst loss for the Trailblazers this season, as they lost to the Thunder by 63 earlier in the season, losing Friday night to the Miami Heat by 60 points. Probably maybe hurts a little bit more just how much animosity there was between Blazers fans and Heat fans this offseason. But at this point, none of that stuff really matters. The Heat trying to round into form. They've been struggling a bit as well too, so had a chance to get right versus the Trailblazer team that did get Deandre Ayton and Matisse Thybulle back in the lineup. Obviously, those 2 guys not nearly enough to avoid the loss, let alone avoid a 60-point loss. In some respects, it's almost feeling a little bit like the 7-game trip that Portland went on earlier this season, in which they lost a whole bunch of games by a whole lot of points. I will say the first 2 games of the trip, while they did end up losing by double digits, seemed generally competitive. That was not the case Friday night, but you really need to see some kind of bounce back in their next game in Orlando versus the Magic on Monday night to feel like this trip isn't going from bad to worse to terrible. So if they're able to come out Monday night versus the Orlando Magic and at least play better, maybe feel a little better about the trip in general. If they come out and get smoked again, then I think you start worrying a bit. Moving on, while there's been speculation the Trailblazers are resting players just to rest them, on Friday night, we saw 2 players return to the lineup who had missed significant amount of games due to injury. Deandre Ayton and Matisse Thybulle both played in Friday night's loss to the Heat. Matisse, however, only played 7 minutes and left with a quote-unquote right ankle impingement, so that might be the season for Matisse. He came back one time, played a quarter, missed more games, came back again, played a quarter, missed the rest of the game. At this point, with a number of games remaining, I'm not necessarily sure that you keep trying to get Matisse out there if he's only able to play a quarter or two and then the injury flares up again. Deandre, though, looked pretty good versus the Miami Heat, at least as good as anyone could look in that game for the Trailblazers. 18 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal in 24 minutes for Deandre Ayton. He started, and I would assume at this point that if he doesn't have any more setbacks, that he will be in the rotation for the rest of the season. Maybe he doesn't start every game for the rest of the season, but I imagine at this point he will start quite a few of those games. In more injury news, after a few practices with the Remix, Shaedon Sharpe has rejoined the team here in Miami with hopes of playing, if not on this trip, then in one of the final 4 games of the season once the team returns to the West Coast. It's very possible he does end up playing in one of the games on this road trip, or maybe multiple games on this road trip, but I think it really depends on, one, whether or not they're able to get in some contact practices with Shaedon. The team has had a couple practices on this road trip thus far. If they're able to have a few more, and if Shaedon's able to get out there and looks good and doesn't have any setbacks, perhaps he plays in this trip. If not, maybe he gets some run in and then gets back on the floor at some point in time, as I mentioned, either in the 3 games they still have left at home or the 1 game remaining versus the Kings in Sacramento. Whatever the case, Shaedon is improving. Whether or not that means he's going to play again this season has more to do with how he does in terms of his rehab than anything else. So it's a little hard to say at this point. You don't know how he's going to respond necessarily to the increased workload after that core muscle surgery. But at least in theory, the hope is that Shaedon will be able to come back at some point in time this season, perhaps as soon as this road trip. TBD on that one. But unfortunately, on this road trip, Toumani Camara suffered a left rib contusion at some point in time in Wednesday's loss to the Hawks. Toumani has been one of the few players this season who hasn't missed significant time due to injury, so the fact that he wasn't able to play through the injury on Friday night versus the Heat, particularly here in Miami, where he played 4 years in high school after coming from Belgium, would lead me to believe that that injury is at least somewhat significant. I asked Chauncey Billups about it prior to the game on Friday night, really didn't have any updates. Sounds like he took a pretty good shot. I don't even know if Toumani was at the game on Friday night. Perhaps that's due to the fact that he is back home, or at least his American home, or perhaps that's due to the fact that the injury is something that's keeping him from even coming to practices. Either way, not good news there for Toumani. Not sure what his status is going to be going forward. Obviously, we'll find out on Sunday night whether or not he's able to play Monday night versus the Magic, but if I had to guess, I'd say Toumani is going to miss more time than that, which is really unfortunate because he's one of the guys who has really been playing well as of late, has really been making progress at the tail end of his rookie season. Now, granted, Toumani has already proven himself this season as a rookie, but you'd love to see him be able to play this thing out. Not sure that's necessarily going to be the case. As for the other injured Trailblazers, no update on Malcolm Brogdon, Anthony Simons, or Jeremy Grant. I would say at this point it's fair to wonder if any of those guys are going to play again this season, though it would not at all surprise me if they all played again this season. No updates there. The only updates I imagine we're probably going to get is if they end up playing. Moving on, taking a quick look at the lottery odds, the Warriors defeated the Hornets on Friday night, a game that would have been great for the Trailblazers if it had gone the other direction. The Hornets with just 1 fewer win than the Trailblazers, and the Blazers get the Golden State Warriors pick, so you'd like that to be worse. If the Warriors would have lost to the Hornets, the Blazers and the Hornets would have the same record, meaning that the Blazers would have a better chance of getting better lottery odds as they finish out the season, and their pick from the Golden State Warriors that they got in the Bucks trade would have been better. That was not the case, however. Golden State ended up winning that game. Though the Warriors are on the cusp of missing out on the playoffs this season, with the Rockets hard charging behind them, just 1 game back for the Rockets for that 10th and final spot, that last play-in spot. So as we go into the last couple weeks of the season here, you're definitely rooting against the Warriors any chance you get, as that will improve Portland's draft pick, seeing as how Portland gets that pick as long as it doesn't end up in the top 4, which at this point would be pretty difficult. If the Warriors did end up with a top 4 pick, they would have to strike absolute gold in the lottery. It has happened before. Hopefully it doesn't happen this year. One thing Friday night that did help Portland's lottery odds, however, or at least potentially help their lottery odds, is the San Antonio Spurs defeating the New York Knicks in overtime Friday night in San Antonio. Spurs now with 18 wins this season, just 1 fewer than the Portland Trailblazers. Spurs are 3rd to last right now. The bottom 3 teams get the same odds in the draft lottery, I believe around 14% to get the first pick. So if you end up in the 30th, 29th, or 28th, you have the same lottery odds as all those teams. You might recall that the NBA flattened those lottery odds a few seasons ago, so the 3 teams at the bottom of the standings all have the same amount of odds, and the Blazers are very close to that with 8 games to play and 19 wins this season. And the Blazers and the Hornets, who are right behind the Trail Blazers, play on this road trip, meaning that whichever team loses that game is going to have the leg up in getting the better lottery odds. Portland, as of right now, basically cannot fall to anything worse than the 5th best lottery odds, seeing as how the team above them, the Toronto Raptors, have 23 wins. And while it's obviously conceivable that the Blazers win 4 more games this season, the way they're playing right now, it does not seem likely that they're going to win 4 more games this season. So you figure where Portland is at right now in the standings is the absolute best that they're going to be, and they could still fall back a few more spots. They're not going to end up behind the Wizards, and they're not going to end up behind the Pistons, but very possibly could end up behind the Hornets and the Spurs. And if they do end up behind the Hornets and the Spurs, once again, they will have the absolute best lottery odds that they can have going into the draft lottery. All right, a quick look at the Trailblazers betting markets. After covering in their last 2 games at home, the Blazers have failed to cover in their first 3 games of the 7-game road trip. They were 14.5-point underdogs to the Rockets and lost by 18, 11.5-point underdogs to the Hawks and lost by 14, and were just 7-point underdogs to the Heat, which I was rather surprised by the way, and lost that game by 60. So as it stands, the Blazers are now 34, 39, and 1 versus the spread this season. And I mentioned it on the last edition, or at least I prefaced it on the last edition, that the Blazers had basically no chance whatsoever of hitting the over on their season win projection, but that became official earlier this week, as the chances of the Trailblazers hitting the over on their season win projection of 28.5 wins officially died. As in, the Blazers need 10 wins to hit the over, and there are no longer 10 wins left in Portland's season. Therefore, they cannot hit the over. So if you bet the under, you win. If you bet the over, you were optimistic, and you lost. But I don't know, folks. I think I'd rather lose betting the over than win betting the under. Because when you bet the under, you got to root against your team. Who wants to do that? And of course, all this information is just for information only. It is not for betting purposes. I am not giving you betting advice. I will never give you betting advice. I follow the rules that the NBA has set out for us in terms of gambling, and I'm going to stick to those rules. So congrats to the winners. Sorry to the losers. If you won a lot of money betting on the under, maybe give some of that money to charity, and I hope you didn't lose a whole lot of money betting on the over. Only bet what you can lose, folks. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up with an interview with Justin Minaya. Justin, in his 2nd season out of Providence, played last season in the NBA G League with the Mexico City Capitans, joined the Trailblazers at the end of last season, went back and forth as a member of the Remix for a while, eventually got a 2-way contract. One of those opened up, has been on a 2-way contract for the Trailblazers for about half the season. Had a chance to talk to Justin after the team meeting on Friday about how his season has gone, his background, switching from baseball to basketball. His father has been an executive in baseball for the Mets and the Yankees, so I was curious how his dad took the news when he decided that he wanted to focus on basketball, playing in Mexico City, the skills that he's working on, his relationships with the players and coaches with the Trailblazers, and what he's hoping to accomplish in these last few weeks of the season. It's always fun talking to Justin. Heck of a good guy. Here's what he had to say. Well, here with Justin Minaya. Justin, thank you for taking the time. So first off, just how's your season gone this year? 2-way player, you spent some time with the G League with the Remix, you spent some time with the Trailblazers. Yeah. How has it been for you this season?
It's been really good, man. It's been really good. It's been good to kind of have a bunch of different relationships with both teams. You kind of have a different role on each team, sure. And you kind of find that routine with both teams. And once in the beginning it was a little bit tougher, but once I kind of found that routine of okay, this is going to be my daily routine when I'm with the Remix, and this is going to be how it is with the Trailblazers, it kind of got a lot easier for me.
Could you explain maybe some of the differences a little bit? I mean, because I think people maybe kind of realize, obviously with the Remix you do one thing, Blazers do another, but could you maybe get a little more detail about what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I mean, no matter where I play, I always try to assert myself defensively. But I just think offensively I have a little bit bigger of a role maybe with the Remix, and that's where I have the time to really improve on my stuff and really try to get better and try to maybe gain some confidence offensively, definitely with the Remix. And then when I'm with the Trailblazers, I try to just bring energy. I try to just guard as hard as I can, maybe get some offensive rebounds and try maybe show that I've gotten a little bit better offensively with the remix when I bring that up top to the Trailblazers.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little about your background a little bit? I grew up in Jersey, went to South Carolina, then Providence. You talk a little about kind of your journey as a person and as a basketball player.
Yeah, I started out in New Jersey, and I was actually a baseball player growing up. I
kind of figured you might be. Every time we're in New York, especially people are like, "Is that?" And we're like, "Yeah, no, it is." Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up a baseball player. My dad, he worked with the New York Mets. He was a general manager for them, and now he's with the Yankees. But yeah, I kind of grew up playing baseball, and then around when I was like 15 years old, I kind of made the switch. And then that's where I kind of just started taking basketball serious around like my sophomore year of high school, and then ended up going to South Carolina. Played there for 3 years, and then my fourth year I went to Providence in Rhode Island, and that was a really good year. Then didn't get drafted, went to the G League in Mexico City, and that was a great experience. That was where I really got a lot of confidence and really became the player I am. The end of that year, the end of the G League year, the Trailblazers called me up, and so that's what brought me here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a few things there. How did that switch from baseball to basketball go? Because again, I know your dad is obviously he's very into baseball. How did that kind of go over?
Yeah, I remember being a little nervous, I don't know how he's gonna, but he was perfectly fine. He's always been my number one supporter. He was just whatever I wanted to do, he was gonna help me with. So at first I was nervous, but then I was it felt good to kind of be able to just play basketball and not have to worry about baseball anymore.
Yeah, and kind of take your own path, it's not the same for everyone. And a good father wants
exactly. And that was another thing. It was I didn't want people to say maybe I made MLB because of my dad or something. I was just I wanted to do my own thing and just be separate from that. So
absolutely. You mentioned playing with the Capitans of Mexico City. That's got to be a real interesting experience to play internationally in a G League team and in the only team in Mexico.
Yeah. It was a great experience though. The fans in Mexico City, they showed so much support, so much love. It felt like sometimes NBA games, there would be 10,000, 15,000 fans at a G League game. So having that experience was great. My coach, Coach Ramon Diaz, his name was, he just gave me so much confidence. I can't even imagine how much he helped me. It's crazy.
Can you talk about that in the G League? Because you mentioned, you get a chance in the G League to maybe kind of build your confidence and work on some of those skills that you have, but you don't maybe necessarily get the opportunity to show in an NBA game.
Yeah, definitely. I think the G League was big for me this year as well because it almost it helps show my growth because there might be times where I'm with the main team where I'm not playing and I'm not really getting as much time. So then I'll be able to go to the G League and I'd be able to realize, okay, I am getting better. I am improving. That was good because if you don't play every day, you kind of don't see it, and you start to lose a bit of confidence. So having that G League team with the remix was big time for me.
What was it like to get the two-way too? Because I know you were a guy you were kind of going back and forth, and then kind of some of the things changed. Yeah. WAP gets a full contract, and then you end up getting a two-way. Kind of what was that like for you?
No, it was big time. It felt great. I mean, it felt like a lot of the work I put in throughout the years was to get that, and I mean, it felt like it's been a dream come true to be able to be in the NBA. So,
what's it been like practicing and playing with the Blazers, kind of from terms of not even just kind of like a playing perspective, but kind of the relationships you talk about with not only the players but also the coaches as well?
It's been really good. It's been really good. Since day one, Chauncey's been amazing with me. He's always instilled confidence in me, and he's always been there for me. I feel like with the players, it's good because I have such different relationships with a lot of the groups. You have the veterans like Jeremy and Malcolm, and you can go to them for any advice, and they'll be there for you. But then I also have the younger guys that I Roop, me and Roops, who work out together every day. Chris too, Toumani, all of us. We're a little younger, so we kind of relate a little bit more. Yeah. But just having that mix is amazing for me.
What are kind of your hopes for the rest of the season? 6 or 7 or 8 games. What are you maybe hoping to get accomplished or to show in this last stretch of the season?
Yeah, just to show my improvement, and just really enjoy playing. It's just a blessing to be in the NBA and really try to show how much I've improved this year and just keep growing, just keep getting better. That's kind of my main focus every day, just to stay with it and stay with the process.
And maybe more long term, kind of going into the off season. I imagine probably some summer league is probably in your future. Kind of what are you're hoping maybe for the next couple of years of your career?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Definitely want to be able to stay in the league and just keep improving on that, keep building on where I'm at right now. I know it's all not going to come at once, but just to know that I have just to take it day by day and just keep improving. That would be big. Doing things like summer league, doing things like just off-season workouts, those are going to be just important times for me as well.
So there you go. Good stuff there from Justin Minaya. One of those guys who's out there trying to follow his dreams. Hard-nosed player, guy who always gets kudos from the coaching staff, from his teammates. And I think we've seen more and more when you give these guys the opportunity, a lot of times they'll surprise you. I don't think a lot of people expected to get what we got out of WAP this season. He's become a very good player. Same with a guy like Delano Banton, who the Blazers get for next to nothing. Basically, the Celtics actually give Portland money to take Delano Banton. Gets here, gets an opportunity, and looks like he maybe has a little something more than he's been able to show in the NBA. A guy like Justin Minaya, a lot of times, your time in the G League is just about holding on for long enough to get that opportunity to show an NBA team what you can do. Justin, on a two-way contract, has had an opportunity to do that. I think he's going to continue to have an opportunity to do that as this team gets built out going forward. I would imagine we'll probably see him in Las Vegas with the Blazers this offseason for Summer League, and then going forward, perhaps another chance for another two-way with the remix, or maybe he's able to get a full contract. Blazers love his defensive versatility. As he mentioned, a guy who has more of an offensive game than he's been able to show with the Trailblazers for obvious reasons. Perhaps at some point in time next season, he gets that opportunity. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, more editions as we continue this long sojourn down the East Coast, last long road trip of the season for your Portland Trailblazers as we wrap this thing up going into the 2024 offseason, a very important offseason as many of them are going to be going forward for this Trailblazers team. So we'll talk to you in a couple days. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I am Casey Holdahl. Thank you for joining me. Go Blazers.